The needle felt like a tiny, angry hornet. For 10 years, that was my life. A calendar of hornets, hormone schedules, and the quiet clinical hum of a doctor's office. 10 years of my body being a science experiment that kept failing the final exam. My name is Jessica. I'm 35, and for the last decade, my family has defined me by one word: broken. The Sunday dinner table at my mother's house was my personal hell, a perfectly set stage for my weekly humiliation. The scent of roasted chicken and my mother Palmer's disappointment hung heavy in the air. Across from me, my younger sister, Nicole, glowed. At 33, she was on her second child, a walking, talking monument to everything I wasn't. Her husband, Zachariah, sat beside her, looking vaguely pleased with himself, while my husband, Matteo, squeezed my hand under the table. His touch was the only thing keeping me anchored. Liam got Student of the Month again, Nicole announced, fluffing her 4-year-old daughter's hair. And little Maya is already starting to walk. Can you believe it? She's not even 1. Of course she is, my mother said, beaming. The Lane women have always been strong, good hips, fertile. She shot a look my way, a glance so quick it was almost deniable, but I felt it like a physical slap. It was her favorite theme. Matteo's grip tightened. He was 38, 3 years my senior, and had the patience of a saint who'd married a storm. He'd held me through every negative pregnancy test, every failed IVF cycle, and every one of these god-awful dinners. "That's wonderful, Nicole," I said, my voice a carefully constructed wall of pleasantness. "You must be so proud." "Oh, we are," she chirped. "It's just a blessing, you know, to have your body just work the way it's supposed to." There it was. Not a direct attack. Never that. Just a little poisoned dart, delivered with a smile. I took a slow sip of water, picturing myself throwing the glass against the wall. Instead, I just nodded. For years, this was my role. The silent, smiling tragedy. The empty chair at the generational table. My mother, at 58, saw my childlessness as a personal failure, a stain on her legacy. She'd once told me, after our third IVF failed, that maybe I was just too uptight to be a mother, as if my womb could be coaxed open with a glass of wine and a spa day. I met Matteo's eyes across the table. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. He knew the rage simmering just beneath my calm exterior. He also knew my secret, the one we'd been keeping for 3 long, agonizing years. They all saw me as stagnant, a story that had ended before it began. They had no idea that my world was on the verge of a seismic shift. Something was about to change, and the aftershocks were going to level this entire house of glass smiles. I let them talk, their voices fading into a dull drone of preschool triumphs and potty training woes. I thought about the long nights Matteo and I had spent filling out paperwork until our fingers cramped, the interviews with social workers that felt more invasive than any medical procedure, the thousands of dollars and oceans of hope we'd poured into a country halfway across the world. I thought about a photograph on our nightstand of a little girl with dark, curious eyes and a gap-toothed grin. "It's a shame, really," Palmer said, pulling me from my thoughts. She was looking at me again, her expression a practiced mask of pity. "All that love you have to give, Jessica. Wasted." "My love isn't wasted, Mom," I said, my voice colder than I intended. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before Nicole jumped in, a master of deflection. Speaking of love, she said, placing a hand dramatically on her stomach. Zach and I have some news. The table fell silent. Everyone turned to her. She looked from our mother to me, her eyes lingering on me with a particular brand of triumphant pity. We're pregnant, she announced, her voice dripping with saccharine joy. Number 3 is on the way. Palmer gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as tears of happiness welled in her eyes. Zachariah puffed out his chest. Mateo's hand was a rock in mine. I felt nothing but a cold, clear calm. The final piece of the puzzle had just clicked into place. And, Nicole continued, her smile widening into a weapon, we're having a huge gender reveal party next month. A real celebration. And of course, Jessica, you have to come. The car ride home was silent, thick with everything we hadn't said. Mateo drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I stared out the passenger window, watching the streetlights blur into long, watery streaks. Nicole's announcement echoed in my head, a smug, triumphant loop. You don't have to go, Mateo said finally, his voice gentle. If I don't, they win, I whispered. Mom will call it being a sore loser. Nicole will call it being bitter. Let them, he said, pulling into our driveway. Who cares what they call it? I did. That was the pathetic truth. A part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 35 years to seek their approval, still cared. He killed the engine, and we sat in the quiet dark of our garage. My mind drifted back 4 years to a sterile white room, the air smelling of rubbing alcohol and failure. It was our last round of IVF. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, had just told us it hadn't worked. Again. We were out of money, out of eggs, out of hope. Later that week, my mother had cornered me in her kitchen. She'd put a hand on my arm, her touch meant to seem comforting, but feeling like a brand. I was talking to my friend Carol, she'd said. Her daughter had the same problem. She just learned to relax. Maybe you're too uptight to be a mother, Jessica. You hold everything in. The memory still had the power to steal my breath. It wasn't just the cruelty, it was the gaslighting. She'd made my grief into a character flaw, my body's betrayal into a personal failing. That was the night Mateo and I opened the bottle of expensive scotch we'd been saving for a positive pregnancy test. And as we drank, he brought up adoption for the first time. Not as a consolation prize, but as a different path, a better one. For the next 3 years, that path became our secret garden. We told no one. Not my parents, not Nicole, not even my closest friends at first. It was ours to protect from the blight of my family's judgment. We spent weekends buried in paperwork, evenings on Skype calls with agency coordinators, and nights worrying about court dates in a country 9 time zones away. It was a quiet, grueling, sacred process. I'll never forget the day we got the email. It was a Tuesday. The subject line just said, Camila. Inside was a single, slightly blurry photograph. A 7-year-old girl with big dark eyes that seemed to hold the entire world's sorrow and wisdom sat on a small stool. She had a shy, crooked smile and was holding up a drawing of a yellow sun. That's her, Mateo had breathed, looking over my shoulder. That's our daughter. In that moment, the years of needles and hormones and my mother's corrosive whispers faded into nothing. There was only this little girl, a world away, who needed us as much as we needed her. Back in the car, Mateo reached across the console and took my hand. What are you thinking about? Camila, I said, the name a balm on my raw nerves. And that party. I looked at him, the man who had seen the ugliest, most broken parts of me and had never once flinched. The man who had learned to say, "Men seni suyemin," I love you, in Kazakh, just so he could say it to our daughter one day. You're right, I said, a new resolve hardening in my chest. I don't have to go, but I think I want to. He raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? You don't have to put yourself through that. It's not about putting myself through it anymore, I explained, the idea beginning to take shape, sharp and clear. For years, they've written my story for me. The tragic, childless sister, the broken, bitter daughter. They've controlled the narrative. I met his gaze, my voice steady. You told me to take control of the narrative, so that's what I'm going to do. A slow smile spread across his face. He understood immediately. This wasn't about cowering in a corner or lashing out in anger. It was about standing in the middle of their perfectly curated celebration and telling my own story, in my own words. It was about exposure. Okay, he said, his voice full of warmth and a hint of excitement. What's the plan? I thought of Camilla's gap-toothed grin and the drawing of the yellow sun. My plan wasn't about burning their world down. It was about showing them the one I had been building in secret, a world they knew nothing about, and I was going to unveil it on my own terms. The 4 weeks leading up to the party were a strange mix of quiet fury and giddy anticipation. My plan felt less like revenge and more like a reclamation project. I started with the photo. It was my favorite one, a candid shot the agency had sent. Camilla was laughing, her head thrown back, a smear of chocolate on her cheek. It was pure, unadulterated joy. I had it printed on thick, upscale matte paper, the kind you use for wedding invitations. It felt substantial in my hands, real. I bought a single, heavy, cream-colored envelope to put it in. It was my secret weapon, hiding in plain sight on my desk. I finally told my best friend, Sarah, over coffee a week before the party. I'd kept the adoption from her at first, not out of distrust, but out of a desperate need to protect it from the world's opinions, even the well-meaning ones. When I laid out the whole story, the 3 years of secrecy, Camila, and my plan for Nicole's gender reveal, she just stared at me, her half-eaten croissant forgotten. Wow, she said, letting out a low whistle. So, you're not just bringing a knife to a gunfight. You're bringing a quiet, well-timed nuclear bomb. Is that a bad thing? No, she said, a slow, wicked grin spreading across her face. It's a glorious thing. But Jess, you know what's going to happen, right? Your mom, Nicole. They're not going to send you a thank you card. You're about to light a spark in a fireworks factory. I know, I said, stirring my latte. I think I've been breathing in the smoke for so long, I've forgotten what clean air feels like. Maybe it's time to let it all explode. 3 days before the party, my phone rang. It was Matteo. I was at my desk, staring at the cream-colored envelope, and my heart jumped into my throat. He never called in the middle of the workday unless it was important. Jess, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, wide and bright and breaking through the phone. I just got off the phone with the agency's legal team. I held my breath. And? Her visa is approved. All of it. Final stamp. It's done. He let out a shaky laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. She's coming home, honey. She's really coming home. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. I couldn't speak. All the paperwork, the waiting, the fear, the hope, it all crested in that one perfect moment. He was right. It was done. When? I finally managed to choke out. 3 weeks, he said. They're booking the flights now. 3 weeks. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, just crying. These weren't the ragged, hopeless tears I'd cried after every failed cycle. These were different. They were cleansing. This was real. My daughter was coming home. The night of the party, as I was getting ready, my phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. So excited to see you. Don't forget a gift. We're registered, but anything pink will do. We know you don't have baby stuff lying around, so no pressure to be creative. XOXO. The winky face was the final twist of the knife. It was so perfectly her, a petty jab wrapped in a sugary shell. I read the message twice, and the last of my hesitation evaporated. I put my phone down, picked up the cream-colored envelope, and slid it into my purse. She was right. I didn't have a wrapped present. I had something much, much better. Nicole's backyard was a pastel nightmare. Pink and blue balloons fought for dominance, tied to every available surface. A banner screaming, "Tutus or touchdowns," hung over a dessert table laden with obscenely decorated cupcakes. It was exactly as saccharine and performative as I'd imagined. The air was thick with the scent of sugar and smug satisfaction. Mateo's hand found the small of my back, a warm, steady pressure. "Ready?" he murmured into my ear. "No," I said with a tight smile. "Let's do it." We hadn't even made it to the patio before my mother intercepted us. She was wearing a pale pink dress, her allegiance already declared. She hugged me, her body stiff, her perfume overwhelming. "Jessica, you made it," she said, pulling back to look me over. "You look tired, dear. Are you getting enough sleep?" "I'm fine, Mom," I said, the familiar excuse tasting like ash in my mouth. Nicole glided over, her baby bump prominent in a tight white dress. She looked radiant, and she knew it. "Jess, so glad you could come out of your cave for us." She laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. She then turned to a group of her friends, women with the same glossy hair and expensive athleisure wear. "Everyone, this is my big sister, Jessica. She's our family's child-free adventurer." She said it like a compliment, but we all knew what it was. A label, a box to put me in so they didn't have to deal with the messy reality of my life. The adventurer, who never seemed to go anywhere. The women smiled politely, their eyes flicking over me with a mixture of pity and vague curiosity before turning back to Nicole, the real center of the universe. Every interaction was a small, expertly crafted humiliation wrapped in a bow of fake kindness. Zachariah gave me a brief, non-committal hug. "Glad you guys could make it," he said, already looking over my shoulder for someone more important to talk to. He was the peacemaker in theory, but in practice, he was just an enabler with a good dental plan. For the next hour, we mingled. I nursed a club soda, feeling like an anthropologist studying a strange alien tribe. I listened to conversations about sleep schedules, organic baby food, and the pros and cons of various preschools. It was a world I had desperately wanted to be a part of for a decade, and now, standing on the outside, I felt a profound and surprising sense of relief. My world was no longer about this. It was about Camila. Finally, Nicole clinked a fork against a champagne glass, gathering everyone's attention. Her face was flushed with excitement. Zachariah stood beside her, holding a large black cannon. "Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate with us," she gushed. "We are just so blessed, and we can't wait to find out if Liam and Maya are getting a little brother or a little sister." The crowd cooed. Matteo squeezed my hand, his knuckles brushing against the smooth paper of the envelope in my purse. This was it. "Okay, on the count of 3, Zachariah boomed. 1, 2, 3. He twisted the cannon with a loud pop. A massive cloud of pink smoke and glitter erupted into the air, coating the perfectly manicured lawn in a fine, shimmering dust. The crowd roared with applause. It was a girl. Another perfect little girl for the perfect little family. Nicole and Zachariah kissed dramatically as my mother wept with joy. People swarmed them with hugs and congratulations. In the chaos, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The noise, the glitter, the squeals of delight, it all seemed to be happening behind a thick pane of glass. I waited for the initial wave of excitement to die down, for the applause to fade to a happy buzz. Then I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said, my voice not loud but clear enough to cut through the chatter. A few people turned to look at me. Nicole, still wrapped in Zachariah's arms, gave me an annoyed glance. "I have an announcement too," I said. The buzz quieted. More heads turned. My mother's smile faltered, replaced by a look of wary confusion. Nicole's eyes narrowed. This was not on her schedule. This was not part of her show. The entire backyard was silent now, all eyes on me. I could feel the weight of their collective gaze, 100 questions hanging in the pink-dusted air. I met my sister's glare, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't look away. I held the silence for a beat longer, letting the discomfort settle over the manicured lawn. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice, when I spoke, was steady. "For a long time," I began, my eyes scanning the crowd before landing on my mother and sister. "I thought family was something that happened to you, that it was defined only by blood, that if your body couldn't make a family, you were simply out of luck." I saw a flicker of understanding, or maybe just irritation, in Nicole's eyes. My mother's expression hardened into a familiar mask of disapproval. "But Matteo and I have learned that's not true," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "We've learned that family is something you build. It's a choice. It's about love, not biology." I reached into my purse and pulled out the cream-colored envelope. The air grew thick with tension. I walked over to Matteo, who was watching me with a look of fierce pride, and handed it to him. His hands were perfectly steady as he opened the flap and slid out the photograph. He held it up for everyone to see. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. It was quiet at first. Then it grew as people craned their necks to get a better look at the laughing, chocolate-smeared face of the little girl in the picture. "This is Camila," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It was love and fear and triumph all rolled into one. "She's 7 years old. She loves to draw, especially yellow suns. Her favorite food is ice cream, and she's learning English by watching cartoons. And in 3 weeks, she'll be on a plane from Kazakhstan, coming home. To us." I finally allowed myself to look directly at my family. The stunned silence was more satisfying than any shouting match could ever be. I had taken their perfectly scripted party and ripped the last page out, replacing it with my own story. Nicole's face was a grotesque mask of disbelief, her perfect smile contorted into an ugly sneer. Zachariah just stared, his mouth slightly agape, looking utterly lost. But it was my mother's reaction that I'll remember forever. Her face had gone pale, all the joyful color draining away, leaving behind a slack, shocked expression. Her hand, holding a wineglass, trembled violently. Then, with a slow, almost deliberate motion, the glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the stone patio, the red wine spreading like a pool of blood. No one moved. The sound of the breaking glass seemed to echo in the sudden, absolute stillness. The pink glitter on the lawn seemed garish and absurd now. It was Palmer who broke the silence. She took a shaky step forward, carefully avoiding the broken glass at her feet. She looked at me, not with joy or confusion, but with a cold, rising anger. "Jessica!" she said, her voice a low, forced calm that was far more terrifying than yelling. "This isn't the time. This is Nicole's day. This isn't the place for theatrics." The word hung in the air between us. Theatrics. After a decade of silent suffering, of being the family's cautionary tale, my greatest joy was dismissed as a performance, a stunt. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "This isn't the time. The time for you to ask about my life, to show an ounce of compassion, was years ago. But you were too busy planning parties." I turned my back on her, on all of them. I took Matteo's hand, and together we walked away from the pink smoke and the broken glass, leaving the stunned silence of our family behind us. We didn't say a word as we walked through the house and out the front door. We didn't have to. For the first time, I wasn't running away from them. I was walking toward my daughter. The fallout was faster and more vicious than I could have imagined. Sarah wasn't wrong about the fireworks factory. 2 days after the party, my phone buzzed with a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. It was a screenshot of a group text. From Nicole. "I can't believe Jessica would hijack my gender reveal to announce she's buying a kid. It was so trashy and desperate. Adopting some stranger from a foreign country doesn't make you a mother. It just makes you weird." My hands started to shake. I read it again, the words burning into my screen. Buying a kid. Some stranger. She had taken the most beautiful, meaningful thing in my life and twisted it into something ugly and transactional. Other replies followed, a chorus of cousins and aunts chiming in with their own passive-aggressive sympathy and veiled judgments. Before I could even process the betrayal, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but some masochistic part of me needed to hear what she would say. "Jessica, what were you thinking?" she began. No preamble, no hello. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. "You embarrassed the entire family. You ruined your sister's special day with that stunt." "My stunt?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "My stunt was announcing that I'm finally going to be a mother after 10 years of hell. What was Nicole's special day? A party for her third kid, designed to remind me of everything I don't have?" "That is not fair," she snapped. "Nicole is entitled to her happiness. This adoption of yours, it feels like a sympathy stunt. Like you're just trying to get attention because you couldn't do it the normal way." The air left my lungs. The normal way. as if my body's failure was a moral one. The years of pent-up rage, of swallowed insults and forced smiles, finally boiled over. "You want to talk about normal, Mom?" I said, my voice trembling with fury. "Was it normal when you told me I was too uptight to be a mother? Was it normal to watch Nicole get everything she ever wanted while you told me my love was being wasted? For 10 years, you and she have treated my infertility like a character flaw. You've shamed me, pitied me, and whispered about me at every family dinner. You have never once, not one single time, asked me how I was really doing. So, don't you dare talk to me about stunts or sympathy. You don't get to." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I had never spoken to her like that in my entire life. I was only ever trying to help," she finally stammered, her voice weak. "No," I said, the truth of it landing with the force of a physical blow. "You were trying to make yourself feel better about having a broken daughter. Well, I'm done being your project. I'm done being your tragedy." I hung up the phone, my whole body shaking. That evening, Matteo came home to find me sitting on the floor of the nursery we had been slowly, secretly putting together. The walls were painted a soft sage green. A small white crib was assembled against one wall, and a bookshelf filled with picture books stood in the corner. He sat down on the floor beside me and wrapped his arms around me. I leaned into him and finally let myself cry. "We have to cut them off," he said softly, stroking my hair. "For you. And for her. Kamala doesn't need that poison in her life. She deserves better. You deserve better." He was right. Building a family with Kamala meant protecting her. It meant creating a home that was a sanctuary, not a battlefield. If that meant cutting out the people who were supposed to be my closest family, then that's what I had to do. It was a terrifying thought, but it was also liberating. Just as I was wiping my eyes, my phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was an email from the agency, a message from Kamala's foster caretaker in Kazakhstan. My heart leaped. The email was short and written in slightly broken English. "Kamala is very excited for America. She has packed her bag already, even though it is 2 weeks. She does not have much to pack. She drew you something. I attach it here." Below the text was a picture of a child's drawing. It was done in crayon on a piece of lined paper. A simple stick figure of a woman with brown hair stood next to a taller stick figure of a man. Between them, holding their hands, was a smaller stick figure with a huge, smiling face. Above them, a giant yellow sun took up the rest of the page. It was our family, and it was the only thing in the world that mattered. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of nervous energy and final preparations. We bought a car seat, child-proofed the kitchen cabinets, and watched hours of videos about helping an older child adjust to adoption. My phone remained silent. No calls or texts from Nicole or my mother. The silence was a gaping wound at first, then it slowly began to feel like a clean, healing space. The day we went to the airport, I felt like my entire body was a live wire. Matteo held my hand the whole drive, his own excitement a quiet, steady current beside my frantic one. We stood at the international arrivals gate, my eyes scanning the crowd of weary travelers emerging through the sliding glass doors. My palms were sweating. What if she didn't like us? What if this was all a terrible mistake? Then I saw her. She was smaller than I'd imagined, holding the hand of an agency escort, her big, dark eyes taking in everything. She was wearing a little pink coat and clutching a worn-looking stuffed bear. Our eyes met across the bustling terminal, and for a second, the whole world fell away. The escort said something to her and pointed in our direction. Camilla let go of her hand and started walking toward us, hesitant at first, then breaking into a run. She didn't run to Matteo. She ran straight to me. Her small body crashed into my legs, and she wrapped her arms around them, burying her face in my coat. I dropped to my knees, my own arms encircling her, and just held on. I could feel her small frame trembling. I breathed in the faint, sweet scent of her hair. It wasn't a perfect, cinematic movie moment. It was clumsy and raw and real. Matteo knelt beside us, his hand resting gently on her back, and the three of us stayed like that for a long time, a silent, fragile huddle in the middle of the noisy airport. The first few days were a delicate dance of getting to know each other. There were language barriers and moments of shyness. But there were also flashes of pure magic. The first time she laughed at one of Matteo's silly faces, the way she carefully arranged her few belongings in her new room, the quiet moments we spent on the floor of the living room, drawing pictures together. On the third night, she brought me the drawing she had made for us in Kazakhstan, the one of the three of us holding hands under the yellow sun. She pointed to the stick figures. "Papa," she said, tapping Matteo's figure. Then she tapped mine. "Mama." The word, spoken in her soft, accented voice, hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Later that night, after we'd tucked her into bed, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw it. Nicole had posted a new family reel on Instagram. It was a professionally shot video of her, Zachariah, and their two kids walking through a field of wildflowers at sunset, all of them dressed in coordinating white outfits. The caption read, "Some people have to fake it." So blessed that my family is the real thing. Real love. Family, first, blessed. The cruelty was so blatant, so intentional, it took my breath away. Fake it. The real thing. She was still trying to invalidate me, to invalidate my daughter. My first instinct was to throw my phone across the room, but then a different feeling washed over me. Not anger, but a cold, hard clarity. I looked over at Matteo, who was watching me with concern. I showed him the post. His jaw tightened. "Don't let her get to you," he said. "I'm not," I replied, and I meant it. I opened my own Instagram, my fingers moving quickly. I chose a photo we had taken that afternoon in our backyard. It was a simple picture of Camilla and me, sitting on the grass, her head resting on my lap as we read a book together. Her face was tilted up toward mine, and we were both smiling. It was a moment of pure, unscripted happiness. I uploaded the photo, and then I wrote the caption. For years, I was told I was broken because I couldn't have a child. I was told my love was wasted. I was told I wasn't whole. I guess broken things can still build something beautiful. Welcome home, Camilla. You have made us whole. I hit post, and then I blocked Nicole's number, and my mother's. Hitting block felt like closing a door on a room that had been filled with smoke. The air in my life instantly cleared. I had gone low contact, a term that felt too gentle for the emotional amputation I had performed. In reality, it was no contact. My phone was quiet. My inbox was empty. The constant low-grade hum of anxiety I'd lived with for years simply faded away. I felt lighter, as if I had been carrying a heavy coat I didn't know I was wearing. Life became a series of small, beautiful firsts. Camilla's first trip to the grocery store, her eyes wide at the sheer volume of choices. Her first snowfall, catching flakes on her tongue with uninhibited joy. Her first school picture, where she wore a bright red bow in her hair and gave the camera the same gap-toothed grin from the photo on our nightstand. Matteo and I were no longer just a couple battling infertility. We were a family, navigating the messy, wonderful, exhausting reality of parenthood. I thought about karma, not in a mystical, cosmic sense, but as a simple reckoning. My mother and sister had spent years pouring poison into my life, expecting me to just keep drinking it. When I finally refused, they were left holding the cup. Their cruelty, once it had no target, had nowhere to go but back on them. That was their burden to carry now, not mine. One night, a few months after Camilla came home, a clap of thunder woke her from a deep sleep. She came padding into our room, her small frame silhouetted by the hall light, tears streaming down her face. "Mama!" she whispered, her voice trembling. I sat up and opened my arms. She crawled into bed between me and Matteo, burrowing under the covers. "It's okay, my love," I murmured, stroking her hair as she trembled. "It's just a storm. You're safe." She looked up at me, her dark eyes searching mine in the dim light. "Mommy," she said, the word clear and sure. "I had a nightmare." She called me Mama before, but Mommy was different. It was softer, more intimate. It was the word a child calls out in the dark, seeking comfort. In that moment, tucked between the man I loved and the daughter we had fought so hard for, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost dizzying. I was her Mommy. I was enough. A week or so later, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. It was the same kind I had used for Camilla's photo. My stomach twisted. It was from my mother. Inside was a formal, engraved birth announcement. Nicole and Zachariah Russell joyfully announced the birth of their daughter, Charlotte Rose. There was no personal note, no message, just the cold, sterile card. It was a final, passive-aggressive attempt at a power play, a reminder of the real family I was missing out on. I looked at the card, at the perfect script and the baby's weight and length, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even a flicker of the old familiar pain. It was just a piece of paper about people I used to know. I dropped it into the recycling bin without a second thought and went back to helping Camilla build a castle out of blocks on the living room floor. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their acceptance or their understanding. The revenge I had sought at that party wasn't about humiliating them. It was about liberating myself. It was about taking back my own story. I had something better than an apology. I had a daughter who saw me as her whole world. I had a home filled with laughter and crayon drawings on the fridge. That was revenge enough.